Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Climate, a weekly webcast series from ecoAmerica featuring dynamic discussions with local and national leaders. We offer diverse perspectives and bring forth the latest thinking and best practices for building public support and political resolve for equitable climate solutions in the U.S. Please engage with us online using the hashtag Let's Talk Climate. I'm Reverend Carol Devine. I'm an ordained minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and I'm the new director of the BlessedTomorrow program at ecoAmerica. Due to the lunar calendar, this year, Ramadan, Passover, and Lent, sacred seasons for Muslims, Jews, and Christians, all overlapped. Today, I will talk with two other women who actively live out their faith through climate action. Nana Firman of Green Mosque Initiative and Dahlia Rockowitz, the Washington director of Dayenu, a Jewish call to climate action. Welcome to you both, and let's just get started. I wanted to start out by just saying, in my own experience, I grew up with a grandmother, a mother, where I always was a climate activist or a tree hugger, if you will. But it really wasn't until I took a class in seminary where my concern for the environment and my faith became connected. Do you all have a moment or an experience or maybe a person that connected your faith with the environment? And Nana, let's start with you.
Well, thank you, Carol. So for me, I was born and raised in Indonesia. So I live in the tropics with all the archipelagic islands. And I've always enjoyed being out in nature and perhaps taken environment for granted. And never really thought much about any harmful impacts from human activities towards the earth. So not until after the Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami at the end of 2004, I was called upon to work in the northern tip of Sumatra Island by the WWF to assess the extent of coastal damage and to propose restorative measures that were environmentally responsible. And the local communities lost everything, their family members, homes, villages, and livelihoods. So they were devastated. And back then we worked with very limited logistic, but to be honest, it turned out to be much easier than convincing the local residents to change their ways for recovery following the green reconstruction guidelines, such as at that time for replanting mangrove in the coastal area, which was severely damaged. And despite all the challenges, a friend of mine suggested to me to explore the Islamic teaching to engage with the community, since the people of Aceh, of that region, were very devout Muslim. Back then, they didn't want to listen to me, like talking about, sustainability, conservations. So until then, I've never thought of exploring the Islamic teaching, my own faith, to do my sustainability works. So I had to go back to the Holy Quran and the Sunnah, the example of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And to my surprise, I found so many messages about caring for the environment. In this case, about planting trees. In fact, one of the hadiths, the saying of the Prophet Muhammad, was if the hour is about to be established and one of you was holding a seedling, let him plant it. Meaning that we must finish planting trees. Even the hour is established upon us. So that prophetic saying really struck me because the earthquake and tsunami resemble the end of the world for the local communities. Sure. And yet they still should have hope to plant trees. In this case, the mangrove, to protect the land and the future generation from any further natural disaster. So I literally conveyed that hadith to the communities. And again, to my surprise, they fully understood and agree with me and began to organize on what kind of coastal vegetation to be planted. Yeah. So since then on, no matter what I do, whether on nature conservation or climate crisis, I've always taken such Islamic inspired messages with me to help heal, restore, and renew the earth. because all people deserve a healthy environment, clean water, fresh air, and wholesome food, regardless of their creed, race, gender, income, or religion.
Yes. Thank you so much. Dahlia?
Thank you. And it's such a privilege to be here. I have worked with Nana for, I think, going on about 5 years. So it's great to be in community and to be in movement together. And it's great to be a part of this conversation. For me, I had always been raised thinking of Judaism and social justice as intertwined, and that by engaging in social justice work, that was an embodiment of my Jewish identity and my Jewish faith. And so previously I had been working on issues around food access, around job training and readiness, and a lot of other issues related to basic needs, and making sure that people are treated with human dignity and that they can realize their rights in the way that Nana had expressed. But I had always thought of this work as under this umbrella of tikkun olam, the Jewish imperative to repair the world. And one thing I really appreciate is that in the daily prayer, this term letaken haolam, to repair the world, is part of the Aleinu prayer, where you stand, the whole congregation stands. And so this idea of you need to stand up to meet this work and to address these challenges. But despite being an avid environmentalist and really enjoying kayaking and picnicking and bicycling and being in nature, I really saw those two issues as being separate. And it wasn't until I worked with an incredible international development and human rights organization, American Jewish World Service, that I really started to see those two issues, those two worlds combined. And American Jewish World Service funds community-based organizations in the Global South, and funded many organizations in Indonesia after in similar work that Nana referred to. And through that, I came to see that climate and climate justice was the ultimate social justice issue. All of these issues around injustice, disenfranchisement, marginalization were going to become that much more extreme if we didn't do something to stop the most harmful impacts of the climate crisis. So that was sort of my moment of waking up. And now I have the privilege of working at Dayenu, a relatively new Jewish organization. A timely name for an organization, Dayenu, is the song that we sing in the Passover Seder, saying it would have been enough. And Dayenu allows me to bring my Jewish identity and my concern for the climate crisis and my desire to be a part of climate solutions together, and brings me together with like-minded people, whether they be Jewish, interfaith or secular, whatever brings them to the movement. It's great to be able to show up as my whole self, as my Jewish self, to do this work of social justice and do this work of repairing the world.
Oh, that is just so beautiful. I think we're all like, yes, being able to be fully who we are as faith leaders, as expressions of our faith, while also trying to confront, address the biggest problem ever. So I want to move to our sacred text just a little bit. We all have the Quran, the Torah, the Bible, all proclaim that God created the earth, everything in the earth. Nana, you already shared the tree story, which there are lots of tree stories in all of our texts. Trees are such sacred symbols, as well as just being, sacred with God through creation. But I just wonder if there's any particular text that that you might want to share with us that speaks to your own heart. It doesn't even have to maybe be the one that you carry with you forever, but that like right now, maybe you're holding. Dahlia, you want to jump in?
Sure. Something that is very timely of this moment, because we have just closed the Passover holiday. And as part of the holiday, we have this imperative to see ourselves as if we left the ancient Egypt, B'chol dovador chayav le'adam. In every generation, it is required for a human to see themselves, lirot et atzmo ke'ilu hu yatza mimitzrayim, as if he went out of Egypt. And there's an assumption that underlies that the Jewish people will endure, and that they will endure from generation to generation, lador vador. And what is truly frightening and also empowering is that the climate crisis puts that at risk, puts our ability to live from generation to generation at risk. But to pull some climate Torah from some secular leaders, this has been attributed to a few different political leaders, but this idea that we are both the first generation to experience the climate crisis and the last generation who can actually do something about it. And to me, this also calls forth a story from the Babylonian Talmud. Jewish scripture is taken both from the Torah, the Old Testament, the written, and the oral Torah. So these are how the rabbis of the past debated and discussed the stories in the Torah. And there's a story of Honi, the circle maker, who is traveling down the road and sees an old man planting a carob tree. And he asks, why are you planting this tree? Because you will not live to see it bear fruit. And that man says it's for future generations. And I think that a lot of us in the Jewish faith, a lot of us in the multi-faith space are really thinking about what we bring from the past that inspires our work and what are we giving to the future. I know this also exists in Indigenous traditions as well, this concept of 7 generations. We need to be thinking 7 generations into the future. So I know that both at Dayenu and for myself, a lot of this work is thinking about what can we be doing to ensure that we can live Lador Vador from generation to generation.
That's so beautiful. Nana, what about you?
Yes, so the world of nature is actually a sign of God's presence and tells us the overwhelming generosity and wisdoms of God. And in fact, their harmonious relationship between organism and environment. And this is evident by the connection that exists between God's creations. And I love like how Dahlia presented about future generations, and I always have that also in mind whenever I work. But I wanted to kind of point to this particular verse in the Holy Quran, chapter 6, verse 38. It goes like this: there is no creature that lives on earth or bird that flies with its wings, except that there are communities just like you. We have not neglected in the register a thing, and then to their Lord shall they be gathered. So the Holy Quran recognized that God established the natural world in a life-sustaining balance in which should be respected and protected. So for instance, if you consider animal life, you will see that the structures of their bodies, each of species of birds or beasts, suits its function immensely well. And the qualities and characteristics that has been ingrained in their nature helps to fulfill their needs. And the provision, nourishment has been arranged in a wonderful way. And also the way they live, they don't transgress their limits in any way, whatever. So I cannot be but awestruck by the Quranic description of creations. And such relationship is further deepened in many other chapters within the Holy Quran with name of natural phenomena such as the bee, the ant, the earthquake, the fig, the olive, the sun, the moon, the light, and so on. So all those are the name of chapters in the Holy Quran, which always make me wonder about all this is this phenomenon. So this makes the conversation between nature and scriptures explicit. And we as human beings, we are created to serve our Lord of all being and to work to the greatest good that we can for all species, individuals, and also, as Dahlia mentioned, for the generation of God's creatures to come.
Yes. Oh, thank you. That both of you, that's just so beautiful and inspiring. And I just wish we could talk on and on and on. As you were both thinking, what came to me was Saint Francis of Assisi and his, living in nature and learning and talking with the animals and wanting to be one. And so that's so beautiful. And that really calls me to the next thing, which is, both of us, all three of us are just coming out of very holy seasons for our faiths in April of 2022. And all of us have called people in our networks, if you will, to live out this holy time, praise, prayer, worship actively through actual climate action. For Christians, we had Lent, and there is often fasting that goes along with Lent. It can be lots of things, but carbon fasting has been become more and more popular as one of the things that we might choose to fast from, or at least reduce. And you both have been leaders this month or this season, doing some pretty incredible things. And so I just want you to share with us what you have called people to do, Muslims and Jews and all people of faith, really, to take action on climate this month. Nana, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you. Yes, this is a very important moment in time. It's incredible. And so I want to point it to the sacred month of Ramadan, which is a time to fortify our intention, to seek forgiveness, to strengthen our relationship with God and also with our communities at large. And it is a time to explore, of exploration, time of reflection, and time for action in our lives. And it is also time to recognize that many signs and blessing of God in nature. So caring for the earth is our shared responsibility. And this year is ISNA, which is the Islamic Society of North America. The Green Initiative Committee has conducted actually a Green Ramadan campaign nationally since 2015 to call upon all American Muslims to observe and practice Ramadan with environmental consciousness. So we have it in the website, all the information about that. And while this year also, I'm also part of GreenFaith. I'm the senior ambassador at GreenFaith. Between March and May, there are many major sacred days and month and season. And also there's an equinox and Earth Day at the same time. So together these days collectively attract billions of people of diverse faith to worship, pray, listen to sermons, reflect, and to also do action in what matters most to all of us. So GreenFaith launched a Sacred Season for Climate Justice campaign this year to acknowledge this very important moment. And throughout this sacred month of Ramadan, many imams are encouraged to dedicate their khutbah, which is the sermon, and also their ta'lim, which is the learning circle, as green khutbah and the green halakha, which aims to raise awareness and also mobilize Muslims to become responsible stewards of the environment. Because our affluence and extravagance lifestyle come at the height of environmental costs. And our consumption habits also, our overconsumption has done a great wrong and a great injustice to our planet. And as human beings, we are defiling God's creation. Yes. From polluting the waterways, destruction of our forests, or even the creation of vast amounts of waste. So our actions are not only threatening our own health and quality of life, but also the future generation. Again, the future generation is very important. And fasting becomes an individual commitment to reduce our excessive impact on the earth and to lighten the burdens on others. But fasting also a process of renewal of body and spirit on individual level, but has a collective impact in society, locally, as well as globally. And so this Ramadan, I call upon my Muslim sisters and brothers that we must also explore how to fast from excessive use of fossil fuels in our daily life and our society at large. So this month is a time for us to reflect on our fragility and find balance of the earth and to remind us to be good stewards of God's creation.
Yes, thank you. Dahlia?
Great. So we just finished Passover on Saturday night, and you'll see that I have these beautiful signs behind me that are now unfortunately falling down from use because over the past week and change and in the days to come, Dayenu is leading, there we go. They've really just exhausted. Dayenu and partners are leading roughly 22 actions across the country that are focused on the leading investors in fossil fuels to move their dough. See if I can grab it. There we go. To move their dough from fossil fuels to clean energy. And that call to action at this time of year is both rooted in the Jewish calendar and is rooted in the climate action calendar. So speaking of the Jewish calendar, our friend Rabbi Arthur Waskow at the Shalom Center identified this confluence of holy days as well as Earth Day that Nana spoke to, and really used that as a call to action for all of us to think about what in our tradition we want to bring forth in this sacred season. And Passover is a holiday of liberation and renewal. Liberation because we tell the story of the Exodus from ancient Egypt or Mitzrayim, which some understand to mean the narrow place. So it is both leaving enslavement and also leaving a narrow place and going towards expansiveness, going towards a sense of possibility with hope and renewal. And renewal is really brought forth because it is a holiday of spring and springtime. So using that call to action, we at Dayenu looked at the Jewish climate moment and saw that it's also the season of annual general meetings for these financial institutions that are funding the climate crisis. And so using that spirit, that hope and intention, we worked with Dayenu circles and leaders across the country, as well as partners at organizations such as the Jewish Youth Climate Movement and several organizations under the auspices of the Exodus Alliance to plan these actions across the country and to really root them in the Passover story. So in these actions, we sing and we dance as if we left Egypt, just like the prophet Miriam led the ancient Israelites across the Sea of Reeds to freedom. We also brought music and a sense of possibility to these actions outside of the offices of asset managers like BlackRock and in front of bank branches to banks such as Chase, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, and more. And what we also did is we designated 2 members of our group to be our Moses and our Aaron, our prophets who brought their demands to the ancient Pharaoh. Similarly, we had our designated prophets deliver a letter with our demands for these banks and asset managers to stop funding new fossil fuel projects, to move their money out of fossil fuels, and to release actual tangible information about how they plan to do so. And we met with everything from the doors being locked on us to bank employees thanking us and telling us that they agreed and they would share our message. And we left with a sense of community and strength. But I think most compellingly, we used one of the most well-known symbols of the holiday, matzah, the unleavened dough that Jews, the ancient Israelites and Jews to this day eat during the 8 days of Passover, because the ancient Israelites did not have time for their dough to rise before leaving leaving Egypt. And now we held that matzah up and said, Dayenu, that we don't have time to wait. We need action now. And we need these banks and asset managers and financial institutions to move with the same urgency to move their dough, to move their money out of fossil fuels and towards clean energy and climate solutions. So it's been a really inspiring week. We have a few more actions coming up this week. And we will bring that forth in the coming weeks as these banks and asset managers meet for their annual meetings and vote on what policies they should use to determine where their money falls in the future.
Wow, I love that how the matzah has come to be such a great image and symbol and nourishment for the spirit for this particular action. That's beautiful. Well, I really appreciate this time with the two of you. And I want to say that one of the great gifts of this work for me has been just the ability to literally stand on holy ground with people of other faiths, joining hands and realizing that we are all in this together. and that we all agree and stand on this commonality that the earth is sacred and that it is an expression of God's spirit, and that we as people of faith are called to do this work. I also think that there are no better people to lead on the climate crisis than people of faith, because we do understand that it isn't about us planting a tree that we can enjoy, but that we are caretakers of this beautiful planet, of God's holy space for the future generations and for those that we will never even meet. So thank you for being with me, and I really do look forward to us working together in the future. I invite our listeners to learn more about the work of Dayenu and the Green Mosque in this initiative and the Green Ramadan initiative. And I just invite you to check out the description below and tell us what you think. Engage with us online, again, using the hashtag Let's Talk Climate. And be sure to subscribe and follow Blessed Tomorrow for the latest thoughtful leadership resources and episodes on climate action and advocacy. And from all of us here at ecoAmerica and Blessed Tomorrow, thank you for being with us. People of faith are the perfect leaders for climate solutions, and we all stand on God's holy ground together. We need everyone every day. Thank you.